Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of the Book Lab. I'm Amy, and I'm here with Suzanne, and we're here to talk about books once again. And first of all, you may have noticed that we've had several months without an episode. And that is because Suzanne started school again and has had a crazy schedule. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Suzanne?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I started a PhD program and it's intense and it's crazy. And I'm also teaching. I'm a GTA, so I'm teaching freshman English. So the past couple of months I've been in over my head, just kind of buried and getting acclimated to it all. But it is starting to get better. My baby's actually sleeping through the night now, so that's helping a whole lot. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm making it work.
That's awesome. And actually, Suzanne wrote an awesome post that I'm going to link to in our show notes about just the value of time and just how we kind of decide how to use our time and what we have time for. And so it's really good. But just all things that you've been considering as you've added one more thing to your life.
A big thing.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, today's topic was actually suggested to us by one of our readers. And so this is for all of you who are watching, know that if you suggest something for us, we take it seriously and we might talk about it. So feel free to make suggestions. But so today's topic is actually, what do you do if someone recommends a book to you and then you hate the book? So we're going to talk about that, but also about all sorts of just kind of the joys and sorrows and just the angst that go with giving book recommendations or receiving book recommendations, because it kind of goes both ways. There's just a lot of emotions involved with books because people feel very strongly about the books that they read.
Yeah, and it can be the best thing and the worst thing. So, yes.
Exactly. So, Suzanne, I'm curious, has a friend ever recommended a book to you that you didn't like, that was a terrible book? And I hope that friend...
Yeah. So, I think for the most part, I have friends with very similar tastes, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's only those people who feel comfortable recommending books to me that have fairly similar tastes. However, I'm going to tell my husband's story because I think this story is hilarious. He, I'm trying to remember, it was a mutual friend that one of our neighbors, actually, it was one of our neighbors that he had met before I had. Anyway, she had a friend whose husband had died of cancer and then had written this book, book about her experience with her friend, with her husband. Yeah, her husband dying of cancer. And so this neighbor gave the book to my husband and was like, you have to read this. It is so sad. You will cry the entire way through. And so my husband was like she forced the book into his hands. Right. So he brought it home and he was like, I have no desire to read a book about someone dying of cancer. He's like, I just don't want to cry. I don't want to go there. Why would I want to do this?
Yeah. So what did he do?
Well, so we hung on to the book for, it was a few weeks, I think. A suitable amount of time is what he called it. And then he made me take it back to her. with oh, he really appreciated this recommendation. And then she asked me if I read it. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't read it. But, it was better because she didn't actually ask me to read it. Anyway, so he got out of it that way.
and you were just like, oh, I don't have time for it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. See, but that's what I mean. It's kind of fraught with peril. Because you don't want to offend the person, especially if it's something like that where a friend of theirs wrote it and it's about this.
And it's a really personal story to them. Yeah, and they were. I know it was a touchy situation. Yeah. But I will say that, even when I've had books recommended to me that I haven't loved, I still feel like it's been a way for me to learn about that person. Just be like, oh, that's interesting. That's something like it reveals a lot about their personality to know the books that they like. And so, you know, if all else, there is value in that. So
that's true. That's a good way to look at it.
Okay, so what about you, Amy? You ever had any?
I have. I've had a couple.
Let's hear about them.
So, well, one of them was, again, like your husband's, a neighbor, and she knows that I like to read, and she likes to read as well. And so she will recommend books, but the problem is she doesn't just recommend them. She does walk over and bring the book to you. And for me, that's really hard, because then all of a sudden, I feel like kind of my agency has been taken away, and I no longer have a choice, but I have to read it. Because I have her book. And so if I give it back without reading it, I either have to admit that I didn't read it or admit that I didn't like it or whatever. So, so yeah, this friend had stopped by with a book, and she said, oh, I just thought this was a very interesting book, and I think you'd really like it. It was Mr. Pip by Lloyd Jones. Have you read this?
Oh, and you did read it, didn't you? Did you actually
read it?
Yeah, I've heard of the book.
I have not read
it. I've not read it.
So, yeah, I mean, I think what I came away with, I was like, the beginning was so confusing. I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't even tell if it was like a historical novel or if it was like some made up scenario. And I'm like trying to research it, trying to even like, you know, put the events together. So the beginning was really confusing. The middle was like, okay, but then the end was horrific, like horrible, like mass murders of these people. And I was just like,
oh wow.
It was awful. So I could not figure out why she'd even liked it. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to say to her. And I think, so I gave the book back, and of course she was like, did you read it? And how did you like it? And I was just like, it was a little more intense than I was expecting. And
that's a diplomatic way to handle it.
Left it at that. Yeah, we didn't have to get into it too much then after that. But I did kind of want to bring up, what are some diplomatic ways to address a book if you didn't like it, you know, with that person. And I always think back to Jansen's blog, Everyday Reading, because she does these tell me what to read rounds on her blog, where she has people suggest books to her, and then she chooses 3. And she always puts at the end of the post, she's like, even if I hate the book, I will not hate you. And I love that, because I think that's really kind of an important distinction to make. Like everyone has their own taste. Everyone loves different books, and that's okay. Like just because our tastes don't match up exactly doesn't mean that we can't be friends. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. Although that's probably an easier interaction to handle in writing and virtually than it is to handle face to face with your neighbor.
Yes, exactly. Right. It is. So, I mean, is there any way that you can not like a book and give it back to the person and tell them that you didn't like it? Or do you have to like send your wife to deliver the book so that you don't have to have that interaction? Or say something that's not exactly a lie, but not exactly true either? That's what I'm saying. Can you have a frank discussion with someone, even if you didn't like the book?
I think personality is going to play a role here, because I'm like the non-confrontational person, where I just have to like find that one thing in the book that I can say that I liked. Oh yeah, like I really enjoyed this part of it. This one sentence was good.
This one sentence.
Yeah, that's my personality. But
I mean, I feel like it would be good to pull out something positive from the book, but then maybe
then you give a false impression, and maybe they keep giving you recommendations that you don't.
What I'm worried about.
I know, there's a danger there.
So I think you have to be honest, but not mean about it. But I will say that in my book club, the books that are controversial, or just not even necessarily controversial, but just polarized with whether people like it or not, those are the best discussions. So I really think there is value in reading something with people that don't have the same taste that you do, so that you can actually understand the book a little bit better and see a different side of it that you didn't see when you read it. So
well, and maybe that's a diplomatic way to handle the situation face to face too, is to be like, you've got to tell me what you saw in this, because I didn't see it and I'm just curious to know what was it that, and, you know, like, yeah, turn it into a mini book club discussion, right?
That's a good idea. Yep. I like that. So now let's talk about the flip side, which is maybe a little bit happier. And that is, has anyone ever recommended a book to you that you have loved?
Oh, yes. I mean, like way too many times to count. Because I feel like I only read books that are recommended to me, right? I don't know. I feel like and that may not be entirely true, but I mean, if you recommend it, it's going to obviously be golden, you know, like.
Oh, well, thank you.
So, yes, so many, so many that I could just list any book that I've read recently and know that it's been recommended to me. And, you know, I'll give an example of The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey. That one was recommended to me. Yeah, it was recommended to me by a couple of people. And so I put it on my waiting list at the library, and it took a while for it to come in. And when I got it and read it, I was like, oh, bless these people that recommended this to me, because it's my new favorite book, or my new favorite author. Anyway, it was so good. P.S. Totally recommend it to everyone out there.
I'm planning on reading it.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably my standout recommendation recently. What about you?
Well, this one was actually a lot harder for me to think of a concrete example. And I realized that that's because so many of my recommendations come from like blogs or friends, but
that
it's
totally
not.
Counts.
No, it does. It does for sure. But what I'm saying is, I couldn't think of one that was like the same kind of awkward situation where someone handed me the book and I was like compelled to read it, basically. And then I loved it. Like, I was trying to think of an example like that, where I was kind of forced into the book a little bit more. And then I really loved it, because I have a lot of books that people have recommended. Like you, I feel like almost all of my books, someone has talked about, and I've been like, oh, that sounds good. But see, I feel like that's more my choice then. I like read their review, or I'm talking to them about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds
but
like,
not the like forced into your hands. Yeah.
But not like, you have to read this. So the one that I could think of was like 12 years ago. And it was when I was first married, and Mike, my husband, said, you should read Jane Eyre. Like, that's my favorite book. You need to read that book. And I never read it. And so I did read it, and I loved it. And I've read it again since then. It's one of my very favorite books. So, but of course, he kind of knew my taste a little bit.
That always does help,
a lot
right?
of people. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but then I think for us, since we both have book blogs, people ask us for recommendations quite often.
All the time.
It was so funny because, so yesterday, for our viewers, Suzanne and I tried to do this yesterday morning, and we were having technical difficulties. But it was so funny. As we were trying to do it, a friend was texting me and saying, hey, I'm about to go to the library. Do you have any good book recommendations for me to check out? I thought it was so funny that I was about to do this video. And then earlier today, also, someone else messaged me on Facebook and was like, my 7-year-old daughter, we've been starting to read aloud. Do you have any recommendations for read aloud? So I love it when people ask me for recommendations. It's so fun, but it is also a little bit nerve-wracking because, you know, everyone's tastes are different, and you don't know if they're going to love that book. And sometimes it's hard for various reasons. Either it's hard to recommend a book that you adore, because if they hate it, that's like they're, you know, saying bad things about your child.
Exactly. It can be hard.
Yeah. And you wonder if there's something wrong with you as a person, that they could not like it when you like put your whole heart and soul into this book. And then there's the other, just, you know, I always worry some of my favorite books have content in them that are maybe a little bit mature or language that, you know, I wouldn't
that not
use,
everyone's
but,
comfortable with. Mm-hmm.
yes. And so I don't want to recommend it to someone and then they read it and they're like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe she was reading this book.
I
or,
know.
you know,
Oh, I
whatever.
worry about that all the time.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
it's hard to make recommendations for that reason, because I don't know, I'm worried people are judging me as a reader based on what I'm recommending to them that I like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, can you think of any time where you've recommended a book and someone has not liked it?
Yes, I can. This actually happened last year and it was kind of awkward. I mean, it's always awkward. So yeah, we've talked about, like, yeah, we had a man called Uva. We had our mini book club about it. We both really enjoyed it. We both loved it. I loved it so much that I recommended it for my my in-laws do a book club. Like my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, like they all do a family book club. Or we did once. It was actually one time that this happened. Anyway, so the book I recommend, well, I guess it was the second time. The book I recommended was, I said, hey, let's read A Man Called Uva. And so we all read it and it went over wonderfully. Everyone in the family loved it. This is my husband's family. So everyone in my husband's family loved it. And we had a great discussion about it and it was so good. And then my mom was asking me for some recommendations and I was like, oh, my new favorite book, A Man Called Uva, you have to read it. And so she checked it out from her library and then it was like a couple weeks later that we were, you know, chatting just on the phone and she was like, so Suzanne, that book you recommended, it has a lot of swearing in it. And I was like, oh, does it? I totally don't remember any swearing. I mean, maybe a little bit. Oh, and she was like really offended by the level of swearing in it.
That's what I'm talking about.
And did not finish it. And I was like, oh, I don't know what you think of me now, Mom.
I know.
And also, like, I went through all of this like psychological, like, how was I raised? I don't swear in my life because I was raised that way, but like I'm okay with it in literature to a certain extent. And anyway, yeah, so I just went through like all of this, like, oh, what does my mom think about, you know, anyway.
My mom and I had kind of a similar discussion too, because I had mentioned some book and I was like, but it has a lot of swearing in it. And she was a little bit like, oh my goodness, why are you reading it then if it has a lot of swearing? But, it's one of those very personal.
It is.
issues.
It was super awkward. Anyway.
Right. Especially since it's one of your favorite books.
I'm not sure that she's asked me for a recommendation since then though. Maybe she has. Anyway, we do share recommendations all the time. So
that's good.
Just don't remember.
That's good.
So anyway, but have you ever had a positive time of like face-to-face recommending to someone and it went over really well?
I like made a list of different books, but not any of that category. I was just thinking, like, that I have.
Yeah, but recommended to someone and they've ended up loving it and it's been great. So
I know that I've had them. Like, I know people have come up to me afterwards and been like, oh, I'm so glad you recommended that. But I was like trying to.
Well, here's the thing. Have you ever been that person to force a book into someone's hands and make them take it home?
Okay, I did.
And how'd that go?
Last New Year's Eve, I was reading this book called A Time to Dance, which was this beautiful young adult romance. I've been looking for, well, I wouldn't even call it a romance, but a young adult novel that has romance in it. But and I've been looking for young adult novels that I feel comfortable recommending and that are actually like really great, well-written books. So I was just finishing it on New Year's Eve, like as we were driving to my parents' house. And my sister was there and I finished it on the way. And then I said, read this tonight. It won't take you very long because it was a verse novel. So I said, I'm sure you can read it before midnight tonight. So use your New Year's Eve this way. And so I totally forced it on her, but she loved it. So it worked out.
So I can only think of, I mean, there's probably been more because I might be that person, but there was one time that I forced a book on my friend. She was over at my house for a play date and we were just talking about a few things and I was like, oh my goodness, you haven't read, it was The God Who Weeps by Fiona and Terrell Givens. Anyway, and I was like, oh, I pulled it off my shelf and I handed it to her. And I was like, you have to, you would love this. Everything I know about this book means that you would love it. And she had it for over a year, maybe even 2 years. Like and I, like, it got to a point where I was like, you don't have to read it because you're obviously not like making time. I'm like, don't need to make this awkward. And she finally did read it, and she did. She loved it because I knew she would. I knew she would. But it was super awkward for a while there, where I was like, "I want my book back. You don't have to read it."
Why I actually talked about this on my blog just a few posts back about how I have a really hard time borrowing books from people because I would rather just check them out from the library because there's all this like. Guilt and expectations. Like I have a book in my nightstand right now that one of my friends gave to me, and it's been like a year and a half. And I actually, the thing is, I'm actually interested in reading it.
Yeah.
Which is why I haven't given it back yet. But I'm like, it's not high on my priority list, and so I should probably just give it back and say I will check it out from the library when I'm ready to read it. But
do you know what I think the moral of our discussion here is that you should never hand someone a physical book. You should only do verbal recommendations.
Yeah, I think that is the conclusion we reached during this discussion.
There's a safe rule.
When you can just like email them a list of recommendations, tell them in person, then they can do whatever they want with those recommendations.
Exactly.
And there's no guilt. Like you don't have to follow up with them because they don't have a copy of your book, and they don't have to feel guilty if they didn't like it. They never have to bring it up, or if they want to have a discussion with you about it, they can.
Yeah, so, if they read it and they love it, they will mention it to you. Yep. Yes. So
you're right. So okay, that is the moral of this discussion, everyone. Remember that. Don't loan your book.
Unasked.
And don't accept loan books.
Exactly.
Right. Unasked. I know. I think it's totally different if someone says, "Hey, can I borrow this?"
Yeah, totally
from
different.
You?
Yeah.
So, because we do this every month, we are now going to our book recommendation segment. Discussion. We are ready to give you all some book recommendations, and you can take them or leave them. Feel free to not pay any attention to them, but if they sound good to you, read them and then tell us if you liked them or not. Okay, so tonight we're talking about seasonal reading. It's October, and October is a really great month to get into some Halloween or kind of spooky or creepy reading. And so we're going to recommend a good fall read. So Suzanne, what's your choice for this month?
Okay, so my recommendation is definitely more Halloween-y than fall per se, but it is Dracula by Bram Stoker. And my husband read this a few years ago and told me, "Oh, you'd really like it. You should read it. It's really, really good." And I was like, I don't know, vampires, just like, I don't know, like especially classic vampires, you know. Right. But I think it was a couple Octobers ago that I was like, yeah, I need a seasonal read, so I'll pick it up. So I read it and I loved it.
Did you?
Yes,
okay.
I did. It has a classic feel to it. It is very well written. It is super interesting. The characters are super interesting. And it's just well written. It is really well written.
That's good to know. I haven't read it.
Yeah,
it has kind of for the same reasons as you had avoided it. I haven't picked it up. So
no, it has a very classic late Victorian novel feel to it. So, you know, like I love Dickens and Wilkie Collins and all of those, and it feels like that style of and that kind of writing. And yeah, I really, really liked it. So total recommend.
Awesome. Hey, that sounds good.
Hey, what's your recommendation?
my recommendation is a mystery because I love mysteries in the fall. So are you much of a mystery reader or not really? I feel like you don't. I feel like I haven't seen very many.
So it depends on what kind of mystery. Murder mysteries I have been on the fence about, just like I like them, but I feel conflicted that I like them.
Yes,
because
I feel very similar to that, because afterwards I'm always like, oh, like I'm really interested in like this person's death, and
I know. Anyway, I'm actually reading one right now, so we'll see how this one turns out. Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, I'm always conflicted too, because actually I like mysteries quite a bit, and I've read many murder mysteries and like them, and I always feel like mysteries are they're almost like a palate cleanser for me with when I'm reading. Like they're just a good like light read, which sounds so funny. See, it's like an oxymoron or something, but I'm calling
Isn't it? I know. That's where I feel conflicted about it.
So yeah, but I always feel like, they're kind of fast paced, and you can get through them really quickly, and so they just kind of make me kind of excited to read other things, so I can dive back into heavier or more complex books. But I will say that Agatha Christie, every book I've read of hers is just amazing.
Yes.
Like she really is the queen of mystery. Like she can weave a plot line like no one else, and she always catches me by surprise. And so the one that I'm recommending is by her. It's called And Then There Were None.
I actually have read that one. I think it might be my only Agatha Christie that I've read. But,
okay. I just barely read
it.
another one of hers, actually. I just finished it. It was called The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and it was quite good also. But And Then There Were None, I think, is just kind of in a league by itself. Like the others are kind of classic mysteries where you have one person who dies and like a bunch of suspects. Whereas And Then There Were None is about these 10 people who are in this house alone together, and they just gradually, one after the other, are murdered. And so like,
and it's
everyone
super creepy and super
and everyone is suspect because they know it has to be someone in the house, but they can't figure out who, and people are kind of like joining up. And anyway, it was very masterfully done, I thought. But again, it's kind of like I can't read a bunch of murder mysteries in a row. Like one a year, maybe two a year is good for me. And
every October, right?
Yeah, every October, bring out another mystery, and then other than that,
it's a good season for it.
But yeah, it is. And really, if you haven't read anything by Agatha Christie, to our viewers, you need to check her out, because she's pretty amazing at what she did. So that wraps up this episode, and I wanted to tell our viewers, if any of you have any good book recommendation stories to tell us, awkward misses or really great successes, we would love to hear them. So
we would,
the comments, as well as your recommendations for us to read. We would love to hear those also.
And recommendations for topics for future episodes, if you have ideas for us. This was a fun one, so yeah.
This was.
So anyway, we want to thank everyone for joining us this month, and we will probably not be back next month, but maybe the month. This is turning into an every other month thing, but
that's okay.
We'll be back when we're back with another fun bookish episode. So yeah,
exactly. We're not going to abandon it just because we can't do it every month. We're just going to do it.
No, we're not. This is too much fun to abandon.
Yep, that's right. So
anyway, yeah.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.